Hello everyone, today I'm going to talk about mastering the mobile testing pyramid. Just a little bit about me. So I'm Laurent, the co-founder and the CTO of Waldo. Waldo, in a nutshell, we are a solution to create, maintain, and orchestrate all your mobile end-to-end testing directly from the browser. And so the talk today is not about Waldo, but it's mostly about what we've kind of learned in 5 years doing that, and by talking to lots of teams about how you can think about your mobile testing strategy. The importance of mobile testing should be pretty easy for all of you to know about that, but just the two things that are very important about mobile testing, whenever there's a problem, you have bugs and there's an issue, the deploy cycles are much longer on mobile than on web, obviously, and then there's no way to force users to update. So these are the two things where mobile, even more than web, is extremely important to test before you put to production, because errors are going to be costly. So this is where we get the good old pyramid. So it kind of goes, I like the shape of the pyramid because I think like the width of each layer kind of shows how much you can put in there. And so you probably also, like most of you know the pyramid, but if we go at the bottom, unit testing is really like, how do you test a component? So how do you test one part of one of the building blocks of your whole system? So for instance, you might want to know how something displays in isolation with everything else. You're going to see like, oh, this is how my validation form shows. You put some bad data, you do some unit testing, and then you get inside the code for your app, you know that this component is going to render correctly under the right conditions. But this is really in the isolation of everything else. It's super cheap to add tests there. They usually run very fast, but it's kind of far away from the customer. So what you're going to test there is really about making sure that all your implementation details are correct, and it's really tightly linked to how you are implementing your app. In the middle, you have integration testing. So integration testing, the best way to show integration testing, you have backend servers. So you go, okay, this is my request, this is my response. I don't care about how things are implemented in my service. I'm treating it as a black box, but I'm testing the service itself in isolation of the rest. So pretty common as well. Becomes a little bit harder to test. For instance, for a backend server, you're going to have a DB, you're going to have to have a few things. It's going to go a little bit slower, but it's still not bad. So there you can also put a lot of stuff. And then at the top, you have kind of the dual manual testing and end-to-end testing. And at that stage, you really want to test your system as a whole. So you have an application, it talks to a server, you want that in your end-to-end testing. You want to go as close to what a real user will see when they use your app, and that's going to be costly. So that part is where you want to probably put less, but this is what's going to give you the most confidence that your app actually behaves properly. And so really it's a duality, and it's either or, like it's usually actually a mix of the two, but you can do it as a user, so that's actually close to what a user does because you're doing it as a user, or you do it with end-to-end testing. But when we see at that top triangle, you really see it's kind of narrower, and this is what you want to do actually. So you don't want to try to put as much in there as you put in the unit test, because again, like what goes in there has a bigger cost. This is what we're going to mostly talk about today. So we're going to talk about that top layer. How do you go as close to the user as possible in your testing? But this is important to have the context. With the rest, we have to think about the fact that the other layers exist too. So basically, you want to see what you put in end-to-end testing and how you do it. So struggles of mobile testing. So again, like this top layer, there are two ways to do it. So one, you are the user. You are basically have spreadsheets, you have software to help you know what you're testing, but you're basically just doing it manually. So the interaction with your app is you. You're taking your phone, you're playing with it. And usually what comes back is that it's not scalable, it's pretty hard to maintain all the things that you want to do. You're going to have the devices, and it's overall something that people usually start with, but then they kind of want to go to something else. And then you have the other one, which is kind of the other traditional way to do it, scripting. And scripting is going to be basically you write code to test your code. And there, the biggest problem that people will come back with is that it's brittle and it's flaky. So usually, the problem that's going to happen, especially because you're testing your system as a whole, there's so many things that can go wrong. So your backend takes a few more seconds than usual to respond, or you have something that's slightly different than what you expect, and then now, basically what comes back is usually people will say they get results, but they don't really know what are the false positives, false negatives, and so they end up having a lot of results. It kind of works, but now they always ask their questions, is my automation broken or is my app broken? So that's kind of the lay of the land. So now, this is kind of the two tastes we have, and that's really talking from the experience at Waldo. The first one is really just a mindset. So when you talk about a problem like that, you really want to consider it as an engineering problem. And one of the things probably that happens a lot is that people start doing manual QA, and they start off saying, okay, now I'm going to do automation for it. And they're kind of just trying to do what they were doing in manual QA and trying to put it in script without really further thinking about the problem. So, okay, yeah, it doesn't matter. We're going to write a few scripts. But it's actually, if you think about the problem the way you think about the other engineering problems you're solving, you realize that there are a few things where you can apply that mindset and to a great benefit. The other one, and that's really mostly like the scope of the talk today, so you have to consider the problem to be doable. And so you have to consider your app that you're testing, and you have to consider how you're testing it, and you have to make that separate. And I think that's the biggest part that, in my opinion, causes people that go to scripting or that go to any of these things to kind of hit a wall and basically conclude that, oh, well, automation is actually really complex or it's never going to work, is because they kind of jump to the second one before starting thinking about the first one. So you have to think about automation of your app before automation of your test. And we'll see in a second what that means. So that's the three principles that we think are making good testing happen. So you first automate your app, and you'll see that actually if you just do that, it actually has value just by itself. Then you automate your test, and then you kind of think about the overall strategy and where you think you should put things inside your overall pyramid, where should things belong. Okay, so automate your app. It's kind of a way of saying things, but it could also be said as make your app automatable. And so that's the part that's the most important in testing. So you have an app, it's going to be delivered to users, and basically all the users are not the same. And so your app is actually meant to be able to handle different features. You have a lot of features, and you're going to have to get to how it is to be in one of the states that makes that feature trigger. And so the first thing that you really need to think about is how can you know what your app is gonna do, and how can you make sure that you can actually just close your eyes and you know even before you're opening your app what it's gonna show. So one of the biggest enemy there is like A/B testing, and this is one of the things that if you do your app, you're trying to do automation on it and you don't really think about A/B testing, you're gonna basically kill yourself, because you have something that you're trying to automate that actually doesn't behave in a way that's static or that's kind of always the same. And the second one is basically your app has a lot of modes. So you can be an admin, you can be a guest, you can be maybe a user that hasn't been active for a month. How do you allow your app, how do you make your app slight differences when you're doing pre-release builds so that you can go to these different modes with shortcuts and go there as quickly as possible? So one of the easiest examples, so you have a news app, and so your news app reacts to the news. And so the first time in a normal day, you open your app, it's a news app, and you're gonna see a list. And it says, these are all the news of the day. But once in a while, you have breaking news. So you open your app, and it's gonna say breaking news. The UI is completely different. You want to be able to test both sides. But you don't want to have to kind of go out there and create a breaking news so that you can test the breaking news feature. So you want to have ways to quickly go in these two modes and actually decide and be able to get in these modes imperatively. You want to be able to control that. And basically, the most traditional way to do that is debug menu. And so this is really what you have to think about. So, okay, I have an app, and actually don't even think about automation of the testing itself, but just even as a manual tester, you have an app and you want to be able to verify what happens if you're in a breaking news scenario. Well, maybe the easiest is to say, check the phone, have a debug menu, and say, trigger the breaking news functionality. Just by doing that, now you have 3 easy steps that you know that at will you can do them. That's going to put your app in the right state that you want to be able to test. And so that's what we call automate your app. And actually, you can even stop there. Even by doing that, you're going to make all the manual testing much, much easier in your team. And even then, you're going to get a lot of productivity and actually depth of coverage by just doing that. And so really, one of the things that we've seen over the last 5 years is people just dismiss that part. They are like, an automation solution should be able to handle that. It's a responsibility of the automation solution to do that. But I'm just going to come with my app the way it is, and I'm just going to let it there. The second one is, that's where we are. And that's where there are a lot of other competitors. So I'm not trying to just say, go use Waldo, but I'm saying, if you're trying to see and think about an automation solution now, basically there are a few things that you should probably think about when you are evaluating or thinking which one is the best. So when you're doing your automation of testing, you want to completely decorrelate the implementation details from how you're testing. So you never, I should put that a little bigger. You want to automate the user experience, not the code. So what that means is what a user can see, you should be able to test. What a user cannot see, you should not rely on. And so you want to really decouple what is the implementation of my component and how you are testing it. You couple them, that's unit testing, that's easy. You're going to change something in the component, you're going to change the test that goes with it, it's fine. They are going together, and they are a small scope, and this is exactly what unit test is for. If you change the component, it's normal that you change your unit test. However, if you're doing any kind of refactoring, which is going to happen all the time, and what you didn't change anything about the UX, and it didn't change anything for the user, you should not have to do anything in your automation to account for that. So really what you want is for your automation of your test, you want something that doesn't rely on any of the implementation details of the app. So one of the things that's mostly done is, find an element by a kind of obscure ID, and these IDs change over time. Obviously, this is kind of countering what I'm proposing here. The other thing is, in the loosely coupled test and development, now it's another problem. So you want the two to live in isolation. So you have your app, you change how you're implementing a menu, but the menu doesn't change appearance. Nothing should change on the automation side, it doesn't matter. However, when you are basically working on your app, there's other developers working on the app too. So if you completely decouple the two, then you have your tests that are going to live somewhere, but they are not going to be able to be aware of what the changes are made to the app. So what we call loosely coupled is you want to be able to follow along the development. So if you're working on a branch, you are changing the behavior of your app, it's normal that tests are going to be failing, and you should be able to change that in isolation from the rest of your team who have not incorporated your behavior changes and who should not see that. So you cannot just say they live in two places and they don't matter. If you want to be able to test in your development, you also need to still be able to know where are you at in your development cycle and what are you actually, the version you're testing right now, where is it in your branching mode? And that's really, out of all that, this is how you can tell you've made it. So this is really, in Waldo, whenever you create a test, this is what we're going to evaluate every time. And this is how we know that something works or doesn't work. So when you're making a test, it must be repeatable. That means you're playing it once, you're replaying the second time, it leads to the same output. So the example of not repeatable is you're creating a test. This is end-to-end automation. So you're creating a test that creates a new account. You're using an email. You're running that. It works. You're doing it a minute later. It doesn't work anymore. This email is already taken. This is normal, right? So you've created a test that doesn't work. It's not repeatable. So when you're thinking about your automation and how you're automating your test, you want things to be repeatable. That's the first and easiest thing to do. The second one is deterministic. So if you run it 10 times, is it always going to give the same results? Super important. Flakiness is the biggest problem in testing. And especially as you're testing at the top, the system is complex, flakiness is going to happen. You want that to be deterministic. So again, what that means is actually this is where automate your app is more important than automate your test. The automation solution is not going to help you go around A/B testing. This is super important. Like A/B testing, it's on you as developing the app to make it so that your app can be launched, for instance, where all the A/B testing is off, so that you know exactly what you're going to see. And the third one is super important if you want to scale. You want tests to be isolated. So that means I have test A, test B. They should be able to run one, the other, the two at the same time in another order. It's super important. And so this is really like, by just thinking about that, and whenever you're doing testing and you're doing automation, no matter how you're doing it, if you're just basically applying these, okay, am I having something repeatable, deterministic, and isolated, you're gonna know that this is gonna be successful. And now we come to the strategy. So you have, again, your app is automatable. So you've made sure that you have either backdoors or ways to make your app, for instance, show what's happening when you're an admin, or if you are an active user and haven't been on the app for more than 10 days or whatever. Second, you've chosen your automation strategy. You've chosen potentially a solution that doesn't need to know about the code and implementation details of your app in order to be able to automate it. And you've put all that together. Now you need to build a proper strategy. So the proper strategy means you should decide what should be on that top layer versus the other. And one of the other problems we see is that creation of tests is actually usually easy. And you're going to start and you're going to be very zealous. You're going to be like, oh yeah, let's create 50 tests. It's going to be great. And then little by little, they start falling. They're like, oh, actually, this one is not deterministic. Oh, this one is not isolated. Oh, this one is flaky, so I'm getting like reds when I should not be. And little by little, you're going to have your testing suite that's going to go from 50 tests that you had at the beginning and you were super confident to like 10, 5, and then 0. Actually, when you're doing end-to-end testing, what you are trying to see is verify what the user is going to see the app at the end of the day. What is your core business value that you're delivering? So you have an e-commerce app. You want people to be able to check out. This is the thing. It cannot go to prod if it's not the case. You don't really care if that, you have like a validation, it doesn't show exactly what it should at the right place, and you don't care that if it's for Yahoo and it's for Gmail and it's for something else. So you don't want to be testing edge case, you don't want to do any edge case testing, and even more, I think like end-to-end testing should very rarely go and do defensive testing. You don't really want to see what's gonna go wrong. You want to verify that your users, when they are gonna use your app, in goodwill, they're going to be able to sign up, they're going to be able to come back, log in, log out, they're going to be able to do all the big business drivers that you have, and that's it. That's what you need there. because you really follow, you're going to be extremely confident, it cannot be broken by anybody on your team, but you also want that to come back quite quickly, and you also don't want to have things that are basically going crazy in terms of maintenance. So you don't want to be comprehensive, you really want to just say, what's the essence of my app? Okay, I'm going to make sure that it works. And so the same way that you have your kind of testing, like the pyramid, you also can do the same for end-to-end. So now end-to-end is basically a mean, or it's kind of the nature of the testing. You're taking the app, playing it against a real server, and you're really doing the navigation the way a user would. That's kind of the nature, but now you want to also just think about when do you want to use it. And so that's another pyramid, and this is where you probably don't want to run the same set of tests for all the different natures of versions. So end-to-end testing, you might want to do end-to-end testing for a PR branch. And in that case, you want to test a few things, but that comes back very quickly. And then you also want to have your beta, that's basically like once a week or even more. That one you want to run all the tests as well. So the testing strategy is also being able to say, first, what do I put in that bucket of end-to-end testing, and what I'm going to put in unit testing? And second, out of all the things that I've put in my end-to-end testing, what do I want to run when? And this is the orchestration part. Like, what do you want to run if you have a beta? And so for that part, really, you want something that allows you want a solution that allows you to say, basically, granular cherry picking of your tests. So if you are on a PR, it should come back extremely fast. Like, you cannot have a PR test that come back after more than 20 minutes. Otherwise, you're basically completely breaking your development lifecycle. But if your main branch is merged, then you want to make sure that you're not going to destroy the rest of the developer experience. So in that case, you can have something that takes an hour. So you should be able to put maybe all your tests there, but maybe just on one device, for instance. And then when you have your beta, in that case, you have all the time in the world. It's blocked until you're sure that it's good, and it's too costly to revert, so it's better to spend a little more time there. So you want something that's adaptive in that sense as well. And so, well, that's basically all that I had to say about it. So if you do that right, basically you get a lot of very nice advantages. There's a lot of benefits to do tests right. End-to-end testing is actually very, very powerful in terms of what it gives you as a confidence. It really removes a lot of the manual burden of going over, especially if you have results that show you what you've tested. And overall, everybody's going to be happy. And yeah, that's basically my talk for today. So thanks a lot for your attention. I think I'm a little below the time, which is great. So I have time for questions. And I'd love to hear what you've done, what you've tried, or if you are basically, especially for the automator of your app, if people have been able to not do it, or if people think that's a bad idea, I'd love to hear. And also, this is us. There are some people in there, so if you want to come talk to us, we have a booth on the other side of the building.